What's up, YouTube? So, since I've kind of publicly come out of the prayer closet, there have been a lot of questions about what my life is like now, especially after spending more than 20 years in ministry. And so, based off a lot of the comments and stuff I've gotten, I've decided to give you somewhat of some insight of my life as an atheist. Now, we can start with the elephant in the room. Obviously, almost immediately, there's a loss of some family, some friends, and as a former pastor, some former mentors as well. And of course, some just immediately comes from, well, you believe differently, I can't fellowship with you, I can't associate with that, or I believe that, you know, whatever's going on with you is the devil and things of that nature. And so for sure, it was definitely their behavior, but I want to be clear that it was my decision. By this point, and this process started for me 10 years ago. But by this point, I had decided to stop living my life as a victim of circumstances, and I became okay with separating from relationships that didn't produce healthy outcomes anyway. Because I now have a greater understanding of and an appreciation for human capacity without the need for magical intervention, I have a lower tolerance for malevolent and negligent behavior when it comes to people. So yes, there was immediately loss of family, friends, and mentors, but at the end of the day, it was my decision and one that I was happy for. Even for the ones who made decisions on their own, I was not mad. I was not begging anybody to stay. I was actually sort of relieved, sort of happy. One of the things I realized is that there was just a lot of dysfunction anyway, right? So I've realized kind of that superstition is sort of a manifestation of dysfunction, at least in some regard. So I don't necessarily expect healthy responses from dysfunctional postures, right? So if you can think of it this way, for those of you that still speak Bible, Jesus offered to ask a certain person if they wanted to be healed, and the text says the sick man responded. And that's what you get if you're kind of living in the sickness of superstition. That superstition is always going to respond until you've decided to put yourself in some type of functional posture. So what I've realized is that everything I lost as an atheist when it comes to those things was really only an illusion of things that I never really had anyway. So it was ornamental for sure, and it's nice to feel like you have a lot of these things. It's nice to feel like you have these support things, but many of them, at least for me, I can't speak for everybody's experience, but from my experience, those things were not functional. A form of godliness, denying the evidentiary power thereof. So that's the elephant in the room. Yes, lost some things. Did it hurt? Not nearly as much as I thought it was going to, but that's also because my journey into atheism was also an evolutionary journey of myself. And so there were certain things that I had already kind of wrestled with and come to terms with by that time. Now, just speaking a little bit more from my own experience, what did it feel like for me? For me, becoming an atheist, and especially this recent experience of stepping out of the prayer closet, as I've heard it called, for me, it felt like I was getting up from the children's table. Now, again, I cannot in any way speak for everybody's experience, but for me, the 20 years of ministry, 20 plus years of ministry that I was involved in, I saw a lot of incredibly petty behavior. Oh my goodness, just mind-blowingly petty. And so it felt like finally getting up from that, and it's like, oh snap, I think all of these people are just childish. I think these are all children in adult bodies. It's almost feeling like a wolf being around dogs. But anyway, it's a whole nother story. So I kind of felt like I was getting up from the children's table. It also felt like getting out of the slow lane. I had been hearing my whole life that, Darante, you're ahead of your time, or you're an old soul. And now I realize it's like, no, I wasn't ahead of my time. I just had this sort of emerging progressive worldview that was incompatible with a culture that had locked itself into the misunderstandings of the past. That was something that me as a person who had read extensively, it was very difficult for me to do. So finally stepping away from that was just like, holy snap, I'm with the rest of the world now. I no longer have to pretend like 2,000 years of progress did not happen. And so that's kind of my experience. What I find most harmful about religious superstition is, number one, first and foremost, magical thinking. Everywhere that I've found, and again, just speaking from my experience, and of course this is subjective because this is observational, but speaking from my experience, almost everywhere that I've seen magical thinking as abundant, poverty has been inevitable, because what you create in that type of situation are people who cannot take responsibility for what's happening in their lives, cannot see how their decisions connect with outcomes, and cannot really believe in themselves in their own capacity, because they're always waiting for something else to make something happen. And when things don't happen, they create these magical reasons why, as opposed to going back to the drawing board and figuring out how to make it happen. So it's an incredible it's an incredible thievery of human capacity, which leads me to the next thing that I think is immensely harmful about superstition, is a disregard for consequence. So then people really never learn from their own actions if they can disregard the consequences. If they can say, well, that wasn't a consequence, that was God, or that was the devil, or that wasn't a consequence, that was a mistake, that wasn't a consequence, that was a sin, and God has forgiven me of my sins, so you shouldn't remind me of my sins anymore. Again, when you have a behavior like this, when you have a mindset like this, it robs people of responsibility and accountability. Another thing for me is this attachment to absence, all right? And that one's a little weird one. I couldn't find a better way to say it, but this attachment to an absence of evidence. So when something is obviously not there, not apparent, there seems to be an attachment for the superstitious to invent something to go there. So a lot of times what I end up discovering is that most of the times when people are using words like God or the Lord or the voice of the Lord or the Spirit of God did this, they're actually saying question mark. They're saying something I don't know, but because there's absence here, I feel the need to impose something there. So I find that absolutely damaging. And then last but not least, and this isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but detachment from the data. Being a believer will really make you feel like the world has been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's honestly kind of what superstition needs you to believe, that you're so bad and that the world is so bad that you really need a savior to come in and help you. But when you actually pay attention to the data, you've seen that we've been getting incrementally better. Now, that's not an excuse to stop where we are by any means, nor is it an excuse to, as for why it took us so long to get here, but we are getting better. I'll kind of leave with this. What I've gained by walking away, number one, is a love for self and a desire for self-preservation. Before, I wasn't looking for anything to live for. I was desperately searching for something to die for. Another thing I've gotten was an increased sense of responsibility, accountability, and discipline that's led to a healthier version of me physically, mentally, and socially. Another thing that I've gained is an intense concern for the generations that come after me and the world they'll inherit. None of us are islands. I have to care about other people's children if I care about the social climate that my children will ultimately live in. An informed consideration and concern for others and their awareness of human capacity, a stronger marriage by having a partner, not a subordinate, an incredible relationship with my kids by valuing their voice and experience, and a stronger belief in the untapped capacity of the human spirit. That's my life as an atheist. Thank you.